This is EOF Implementers call number 40. Um, we'll start with client updates for Besu. I had a busy week, Easter week, in-laws, and other things getting in my way. So I didn't get much progress done. I did get that one spec update. We'll save it for the spec updates. But as far as Besu, I should be able to finish all of the spec by the next meeting for the transaction and for the if we do the changes to allow type 0, 1, and 2 calls to allow creation transactions. I haven't tried the new test yet, but we'll do that later. Next is EVM1.
I don't think we have any significant updates, although today I think we've added new transaction validity rules to our TX grade branch, the ones that we discussed last call, where empty init code array is not allowed and empty init code is not allowed. So this is a new addition. And yeah, that's it.
Okay. Great. Ref, REVM.
From my side, I wrap my head around validation and stack checks, and I'm passing most of the. I think I failed just on one test, and yeah, that's mostly it. I still need to not figure, but implement return contract, and after reviewing the PR, it should be up to date. But still pending some fixes and still pending some changes need to be done, but most of the work is basically close to finished.
Cool. Nethermind.
Hi. Well, we had to kind of shift focus for a week to other projects, but mostly our implementation is complete.
Cool. Come back to this on testing, but I think when people are, it sounds like the client, except for we don't have any representation from Geth, which also would imply participation from Aragon, since they use most of Geth's code for their EVM portion. And so it sounds like we're getting to where most everyone's implemented. So yeah, we'll just loop back to this on testing. Next on the agenda is compiler updates. Charles, any compiler updates?
No compiler updates.
Okay, but you want to discuss something about return contract EOF during the spec section. I see that in the notes. Yeah. And we don't have anyone from Solidity on here, do we? Nope. Okay.
Who's the contact from Solidity? Basically, we are coming to the point where EOF should be included inside Prague, or at least voted on. And it would be really great to have both Charles here from the Viper side and somebody from Solidity to say, hey, we checked this is okay, and we want this included.
Yeah, I think we're going to get our go, no go, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow. Okay. Tim had to get through all the people who wanted to pitch their wares for Prague, and next week's going to be hopefully next week's going to be the call where it's in and out, and it's not a call that's going to have all the time sucked away because of the issuance change proposal that's out there. I'm gonna lobby Tim to put a time box on that. But we really need to figure out what's in Prague if we're going to ship it by DevCon Southeast Asia.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think we're in a good position, considering how much work we have completed and how much things are being proposed that people haven't even started working on, to make a strong argument that we should be the headliner for the release. So we'll see how that goes. But that being on CFI is an important signal that will unlock a lot of people to say, oh, we actually have to work on this. So yeah, that's a pretty important signal.
Yeah, in my mind, it's like should be included Prague, but there isn't anything official. And until there isn't anything official, it's still in maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, we
Yeah.
need to figure that out.
Yeah, that's next week's ACD.
Okay, I'm probably not being. The next 3 weeks, I'll be basically out of office. I'm getting married next week
Oh,
and going to honeymoon.
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll
You got more
be
important things to do for 3 weeks.
exactly.
So
So I hope this is going to be pushed.
yeah. Given that your most recent post from the Reth team includes it as lead accepted, I think that's the witness we need.
Yeah,
So
that's why Joe just basically made that post, and it's very impactful exactly because of that. It is in the writing, hey, we support this and we want this included.
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Spec updates and testing updates. I think let's take a quick diversion to the implementation matrix. I think we need to start nailing down. So we got just a couple more spec issues, but I think we need to start looking at testing and being able to identify which tests are valid, which tests are invalid, and who passes which tests. So we can narrow down. And these two items are actually kind of related together. If there's a specification statement and a test to prove it, then if there's disagreement on what the spec says, then we can demonstrate it and we can come to a collaborative decision about what it really means. So yeah, let's do spec updates. So we have two items, ban origin and return contract EOF. Because Charles put his in chat first, let's talk about return contract EOF. Charles?
Yeah, this is just a follow-up to last week. Apparently I missed the discussion. I had a doctor's appointment. But anyways, I think that return contract init code mode should be validated instead of at runtime, and I'm not sure why it was voted on no last time.
So when you say it was voted no that init code is not validated, what did you mean by init code mode? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, what we discussed in Discord, which is at validation time, you basically check whether a contract is in init code mode or not, which means that it's called by referenced by EOF create or return contract. And then there's different rules inside of init code mode versus not.
And what were the rules for init code that they can't have that you have to have a return contract or a revert?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I need to go and refresh my memory.
I think return is made as the invalid opcode.
Right.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And stop.
So I think one of the concerns with this is we're introducing another flag to the validation steps. And are we getting the value out of adding that flag and that extra validation step? Because it's also going to effectively increase the testing that we're going to have to do, the number of test cases we're going to do.
I don't know about that because it needs to be tested anyways, and there is a flag anyways. It's just at runtime instead of validation time.
Okay.
And I mean, philosophically speaking, like EOF goes to great measures to, filter out, to reject invalid opcodes at validation time. And I mean, it seems logical to also try to reject these also. Because this kind of, besides the invalid opcode, I think it's the only place in the spec where invalid opcodes are actually allowed.
Okay.
From my side, it's not great, to be honest. Having init code validation in basically having init code checks inside validation seems okay, but I wouldn't make this change right now because we already like progressing a lot faster, and the change is not going to bring a lot of benefits. I would, if we introduce something like init code check inside validation, I would even introduce a different type of container that's just having init codes.
Isn't that
Because
kind of a
EOF,
good thing? Because like they are kind of actually different types, and
yeah,
they are treated
I got,
differently in the runtime.
yeah. We now have like runtime checks that check if we have full data or not full data. We can additionally have a different container that's going to just have like init codes. Basically, EOF that can act as init. But that will require new testing, that will require like new test sets, rewriting all the tests that we already have.
Don't, I mean, aren't these already kind of tested for?
But they're tested at different parts of the execution. Like for an invalid opcode test, we would just check the output of it versus it being an EOF validation test. They would need to move to different stacks, and the container validation checks don't have a flag to say whether it's init code. We would need to also modify the retestf handling and the T8N handling because these aren't regular. It's a different style of test for container validation and execution validation.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've said my piece. I think it's more, there's like a correctness landmine hanging around if it, both in terms of testing and also for people emitting EOF, if there's these invalid opcodes that turn on in different modes. But
Just to brainstorm idea, what if we include new container? How big of the problem would that be? Not problem, but what we would need to change, how big work would that be?
So my thought is it would be one additional header flag. It would be a flag saying we expect this container to be an init code container, or we expect it to be something that's not an init code container, an execution container. And so that we would need no context from the execution environment, and the containers could validate it. Yeah, they could validate it without any extra context, because that's the other thing we need to drag along is we need to run the validator in one of two modes, depending upon how we got it.
I think the validator can actually be run in like agnostic mode, and then it just tells you whether it's an init code container or not. Because an init code container must have a return contract opcode, and it cannot have the other two opcodes, the return and stop.
And it cannot have both.
Yes, but stop is implicit, so you would look for whether a return contract is there or not.
What about revert? It's allowed in both.
Yeah, I think revert is fine because it's it has the same semantics in both modes.
I think stop is invalid in an init code call. You have to end with a return contract or a revert. You can't
Yeah,
just stop
it
and you
is.
can't return.
Right, it is invalid. I think it's in the spec, but also just because it's the same semantics as return 0, 0.
Right. So you couldn't stop and you couldn't return. And that would fall into category you can't have both. You can't have both return contract and a stop and return in the same container.
Yeah, so you can have the container header, but it's redundant with what the container actually, the code that the container actually contains.
I like the idea of having additional flag in init code.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it also kind of cleans up the spec too, because it makes a lot of rules really obvious how to implement. Like you just can't, like EOF create must reference in a init code container, for instance.
So is it worth 3 more bytes for every container? Or do we presume it's execution mode unless there's an init code flag? Where would we put the flag? Or do we do the implicit return value and just do with the rule that you can't do both? and it figures it out during the validation.
Or kind thing that we can stuff it in. I'm gonna look at the header spec.
Are we okay to add additional byte for every container?
Because the
Each
way the
other.
headers are written, it would need to be 3. It'd need to be a type and then like a length or a description. And yeah, we don't have flag fields yet.
You mean different type? Okay, a bit different kind. How
Right.
it's said. Could we just add it like 1 byte inside the container sizes?
Does a new kind not work?
Well, it'd be a new
It could
kind,
work.
but the kinds are always followed by 2 bytes right now. And so we want to have it would be 3 bytes because it'd be like, the kind, it would be like 05 would be the next kind in the list.
Yeah,
Yeah, but there's
I,
no
I
extra bytes because it has to have a kind anyways, right? Oh, you're saying because the containers are sections are like split up by kind. Okay.
Yeah.
I find with both. It's not that big of the difference. It's a big difference, but in the end, it's like where do we want to put data? In the end, it's going to be inside an EVM. It's going to be decoded and used in different form.
So yeah, I think if we do this, I think the easiest method is the one or the other flag. We would just need a track if return contracts are used. Because we also talked about um, adding another rule that subcontainers can either be the target of return contract or they can be the target of EOF create. And they can't be the target of both. So that would fall in line with that rule that it's, one or the other. And we could add in another validation that the subcontainer validation must match. For an init container, it must be EOF create, and for return contract, it must be execute mode.
Yeah, I was just looking at the header spec, and maybe there's the line where you have like unlimited containers.
So we could swap out the byte, and instead of having it be 01, it could be like 81 or something. So we could use that as a flag, or maybe not 81, 11. That would be, yeah, I don't know how we could do that. That's where we could do it. We could have a different, instead of type 1, it could be like type 7, or I don't know how we'd want to go about that. But that is another way we could do it.
My opinion is that even if this might be like the proper way to solve this, if we want this, then it sounds like this is a big change and it will push EOF out of Prague, definitely, my opinion. I think because this changes all the tests and 2 EAPs at least. And I think there's been this only minor updates stage for the consider for inclusion EAPs. I had this impression.
Yeah, because I mean, it sounds like they're small changes, but they're not actually small changes. It's
I think if we change the header format, then it's a big change. Both, I don't know, semantically wise, and also just it's a huge amount of a big diff to the spec and to the tests and to the implementations.
so who got the action item last week to write up the change for subcontainers can only contain certain references?
Was there an action item like this?
We talked about it, and I thought there was going to be a proposed change, but maybe not. Looking through the PRs, there's none open.
No, I don't recall something like this.
Okay.
Oh,
So I think if we'd
what-
want it, we would need to have some proposed text for probably the solution of the one or the other, and it would need to also include the change. It would be on the container validation. And that would give us a gauge for how much we're getting into.
what would be easiest way to change tests?
I think we would change the validation rules to encompass both the subcontainer can only be the target of a return contract or an EOF create, and then that within your container code sections, you can only have return contract or stop and return. And that those must match up for subcontainers as well.
Mm,
Hold on,
Okay, I
but
see.
with the header change or without? Because we have like
Without the header change.
without the
That's
header change.
without.
Yeah. Mhm.
That will increase a little bit complexity how we verify the bytecode, but it's possible.
I mean, we'd have to change the bytecode verification anyway, even with the header.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, I think there's been this main, at least my hunch, that the biggest issue with this validation rule is that it crosses the boundary between validating code and validating the subcontainers. So you either need to know the code of the subcontainer and the parent container to see if the modes match, like to have the full validation routine, so that EOF create can only call a subcontainer that has return contract. So that was, I think, the main concern
Validation is,
raised by.
I think validation is already aware of like what it is validating.
But not to this extent. I don't remember the argument exactly. Andre, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, currently, yeah, validation is independent. Like each subcontainer is validated exactly the same as any other container. So, and with this proposal, subcontainer validity will depend on how it is used with the return contract or with the EOF create, which I don't like this. Like this, validity of subcontainer depends on outer container.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that the semantics are different depending on how it's referenced. So it makes sense for the validation rules to be different.
Without the rule, we could create invalid containers that would fail at runtime. And the only thing that ever could do is fail.
Basically,
So I think
we could mix and match the two types of the bytecode that we have. And that's bad.
Yeah, because I think we discussed it last week that there's no viable use case where you'd want to have a code section. In some cases, might return an init container. In some cases, might return an actual execution return. That's the only thing that would serve is to obscure things, unless you're writing it by hand. And then that's because you're going to have to deploy what you init and what you deploy are always going to be from two separate sets. So.
Is there anywhere else we can sneak in this flag? Maybe in kind types or something like that.
Not really.
Kind types is for code sections, not subcontainers. So that would break the abstraction. And it's a code, it's a header change as well. So it's also a huge change.
So I think the thing we need to do, we need to probably time box this so we can talk about Origin. I'll take an action item to write up what I think spec changes in the validation code might look like. And if time is available, I might even prototype it in Besu. But I think getting a vision of what it looks like in the specification, I think will help us get better clarity on whether it's achievable in the time we have available. But as a practical engineering concern, if it doesn't look good, we're going to need to table it. I know it's as a correctness issue. It's something that we can't go back and undo. And I also have a third spec item I want to discuss about address space expansion. But first, let's go to Cyrus and talk about ban origin. Cyrus, do you want to talk about ban origin a little bit?
Sure. Can you hear me okay this time?
Yes.
Okay. I'll make this really quick. So number one, origin is bad. It's been advised against since 2016. Every time a developer uses it, that developer can and should be doing something better. Number two, this origin tech debt is necessarily a problem for account abstraction and will have to be dealt with one way or the other. One proposal is 7645, which is to alias origin to sender. And that's out of scope for discussion here, I guess. Number three, banning origin in EOF, which is what we're going to discuss here, will curb continuing origin misuse and might make it easier to deal with origin later with regards to account abstraction. And then there's the issue of legacy deployment still being available and potentially maybe a gas cost bump. But again, that's sort of out of scope for this discussion. Was hoping you guys could offer your opinions on banning origin and EOF.
So one question I have, what do smart contract developers think they're getting by using Origin? And what are the better solutions they should be using?
TX origin equals message sender is supposed to check for non-smart contract, making sure that it's not a smart contract that you're dealing with. And what they should be doing otherwise, why exactly that's bad is a little bit beyond my knowledge range, but there are certain attacks or vulnerabilities to it. I don't know. Could someone else chime in on that?
I don't think there's many smart contract devs on this call. I think we're mostly EVM implementers.
Okay. I mean, I could call up what Micah was saying in the future EOA channel. But yeah, generally speaking, it's just known to be bad for that check. What they should be doing otherwise is, handling situations where they are talking with a smart contract, and instead of just blindly believing it.
I mean, just to chime in, my understanding is that like message sender is like the recommended way to do authentication. There's like phishing things or something, but if you do want to check that the sender is an EOA, then TX origin equals message sender like is the right way to do it. And I'm not sure what the workarounds are there.
Well, that's, I think what we're saying is that it's not the right way to do it. I'm trying to scroll back up to this. Yeah, it's complained about. TX origin use is complained about by compilers and auditors, and has been since 2016 or a little bit after that. I'm reading Micah's thing right here. I'll link it in the chat so we don't have to waste time.
So I think to address Charles, it is the correct way to check the callers in EOA, but with account abstraction, you want to allow we want to eliminate the distinction between an EOA and a non-EOA. We're trying to actively get rid of the EOA distinction as an end game goal for account abstraction.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but why is it related to EOF?
Because EOF offers a way to start discouraging developer use of TX origin in ways that introduce security problems and move us further and further away with each use from account abstraction.
with EOF, we have the opportunity also to ban it from the opcode list rather than aliasing it, which would A, would send a signal, but B, in future chains, layer twos that are EOF only, they won't have origin as an option.
I guess my concern is like this is something that sometimes, maybe not always, but sometimes still needs to be done since we don't have out counter abstraction. And then by banning origin, we're like removing that tool from developers.
My understanding is that there are no legitimate uses of TX origin that can't be done and shouldn't be done in some other way. And so banning it starts the discouragement of these misuses.
If that were the case, then I would just remove TX origin from Viper, but people aren't like coming to me and being like, hey, we need to get rid of TX origin from Viper.
Removing it from Solidity, or Viper is the Python like Solidity language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So removing it from language is a very different issue than removing it from the EVM, because you can still work around it. You can still use assembly inside it. So it really needs to be removed at the EVM level. I'm still looking for that link. Sorry.
I mean, in Viper, it can't be accessed in assembly. But I mean, are people requesting that it be removed from Solidity too?
They have been since 2016. And the thread, which I can find that, ban TX origin. The thread from that, there's a lot of people saying, no, we don't want to remove it from Solidity, but that's a different issue than removing it from the EVM. Here's the link to that discussion. Okay, here's the link to the other one. It's a link to my comment, but you can see what Micah says in response to that, with more information about why TX origin is bad and what problems it causes.
So from a technical standpoint, it's a fairly easy change. You just add another entry into the banned opcode list, and we change a test or two. We don't have to introduce new tests, unlike adding a new initcode mode. So technically, it's easy. My concern is just the politics. Now, on the other hand, banning a code and then unbanning it later is something that can be done. We can always say in Osaka or in Amsterdam, we made a mistake. This opcode is now valid, and we just return it with the same existing semantics, because that's the backup plan we have for the extended call in gas if it's determined that gas introspection is actually essential, which might be for if we can't find a good alternate solution to bring full account abstraction into EOF. So that's the there's two things for it. The question is, politically, is it the right thing to do? And it's beyond an engineering question. I think it's easy, but that's that's a discussion for the rest of the people on the call, what they think of it.
As Daniel said, as EVM implementers, this very easy to do, but it's like, should we do it? My question would be, who is the basically who needs to make decision or basically express the opinion? Should we remove this or not? Charlie's for the Viper, maybe Solidity guys need to come and say, hey, we don't have like use for this. Charles doesn't have like stance of it, for example. Should some I don't know, should we ask some security auditors what they think about it? We don't have a lot like it's easy to remove it from EVM, but the question is should we remove it?
The DDoB auditors did a 3074 impact study and did address TX origin inside of that. I'll link that as well. So, you know, it's generally accepted, and we can get expert opinions on that, that origin should not really be exposed. EOF offers us the first opportunity to halt. We can't retroactively yet without, you know, some other aliasing solution, but you know, halt from this point forward continued misuse of an opcode that shouldn't be exposed. That's what we're talking about.
Okay. So yeah, Charles is, go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I think that Dragon is right. I don't have a stance particular on this, but it's not. And as Daniel and Dragon said, you know, it's not particularly hard from an engineering perspective. It can be done, but I don't think it's within the scope of the EOF, you know, working group to ban it or not. Like if somebody from all core devs says to us, you should ban Origin, then like, okay, we'll do it, right? Or if like for
Sure.
Prague, everybody's like, we need to ban Origin, and then okay, then EOF can be the instrument for doing that, but it's not. I don't think this is the right place to make a decision one way or another.
Yep, I agree.
Just to say that it can be done.
I agree with that.
So I think what we would need to see is we would need to see some big name auditing firm saying, please ban it. Please stop using it. And within the next month. And before we fully lock down Prague, we would need to have no outcry from people saying, oh, but we need Origin. Because if we get people banned saying ban, if we get an auditing firm say ban it, but we get legitimate users saying, you know, I think this is going to be hard for us and cause problems, then that's where it becomes problematic. But if we don't get that, so I think we need to get a statement to please ban it and do a call for challenge us, you know, say, prove me wrong that it needs to be, that we should keep it. So I think that's, yeah, it would need to come from ACD or other routines. So yeah, technically banning it in EOF, easy.
If you read that link, this is obviously not an auditing firm, but if you read the Discord link I linked there, you'll see that Vitalik lent his support to the banning. So there's, you know, one feather in the cap. But yes, I agree that this needs to be brought up in a different forum. But I guess this group can say, which we've already said, it's a fairly trivial change.
Yeah. And who would want to hear it from? It's not just Vitalik, but I want to hear it from somebody whose business is smart contract security.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. One other item, something I always keep forgetting to mention, and write a EIP for this, but I want to, if it's acceptable, write an EIP that would finalize the address space expansion reservation. What that would involve is changing the balance, and I think one other opcode, ext balance no, there's no ext balance, it's just balance. There's balance in one other opcode that uses an address as a parameter, and everything else that uses an address as a parameter we've either banned or reformed, like the calls. So what I would want to propose is that right now, for when you do like a balance call or a call, and one of the fields is address, the top 12 bytes are trimmed off, no matter what they are, and only the bottom 20 bytes of the call are used. I would want to get rid of that rule and say that if your top 12 bytes are not zeros, then it's an invalid address until such a time as we decide what address space expansion looks like. Right now, we can't do address space expansion because the EVM trims off those top bytes. And I think we can point to contracts and gas golfing that takes advantage of the EVM trimming those 12 bytes off, the way they bring in some of the stuff from call data and do packing. It's a way that you can save a few points of gas. So I think now in EVM would be the right time to say that in EVM instructions, we don't do that trimming. You'll need to do that trimming yourself when you bring it off of your ABI. It's just, a push, there's gas golfing to bring it in to do it effectively, to trim it yourself before you call it and pack it in there. So that would involve changes to the call instructions and a few others, and also a separate EIP to alter the balance operation. And I think one other, I can't remember the exact one right now. So Charles, is this about gas-based expansion in the chat?
Yeah, there's rules in the ABI v2, which checks that the upper 12 bytes are clean. So those rules would need to be changed, and I
So
think
the
it might
ABI
not actually
requires the
be
upper
too
12
bad.
bytes. The ABI requires this, right?
The current version of the ABI requires this.
Okay.
And there's no versioning for the ABI either, which is
Right.
something I've been working on for some time, but it's not really a priority.
Yeah, you need to put the versioning in the stream, which is more bytes. So that's actually somewhat encouraging because it's going to be less of an impact and it's already starting to be normalized. This would allow us to have things like call operations and S stores and S loads. Actually, no, that'd be EXT stores and EXT loads. But operations that would necessarily, one example was to try and encode which epoch your smart contract came from, and I don't know what other options are. Maybe just a flat opening up. But that would only be available in EOF. And the reason a lot of these address-based expansion things got shut down was because of the trimming in the opcodes.
Yeah, Andre just said that EOF and legacy contracts can call each other, so like that
Yes.
may be problematic. Like if an EOF contract has a 32-byte address and then it tries to pass it to a legacy contract, then that would just break.
Right, but I thought that's a problem for the address-based expansion, how they would handle that. Because they would need to support, maybe the rule would be you can only call address-based expansion contracts from EOF, and that would be another thing to push people to EOF. So, we're not specifying how it's going to be used, what the semantics are. This would just be to have the opcodes and the trimming so that we can figure that out later.
That makes sense to me. In that case, I don't. If you're leaving the semantics unspecified, I don't see any issues from the compiler point.
Okay. So I'll write a EIP at least for the balance and propose changes to the other EOF EIPs then, and we can get a full look at it next week. Any other spec questions?
Just say that this can be very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, EOF enables like address expansion. I like it.
Okay. It's on my to-do list, and I have a lot of time now. Cool. Testing. Hugo, are you from? No, Hugo, you're from EVM1. Do we have anyone from the testing team? Nope. Anyone want to speak about testing? Okay, I'll have a better handle on testing next week. I saw that there were some changes that went into some of the PRs for EOF. I hope with my time that I now have available, I'll be able to go ahead, Hugo. You were coming off mute.
Yeah, just there is an update in one of the EOF test PRs. It is now the most up to date pull request, which is currently being it is ready for review. So yeah, it is containing these latest changes in EVM1, and yeah, it contains many of the changes made by Peter as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so
are there any known unimplemented features in this set that's out there?
I think the data opcodes are somewhat have somewhat less coverage.
Okay, but the EXT calls are correct. between legacy and non-legacy, legacy and EOF?
The ext calls are mainly covered by tests that we are exporting from EVM1, I think.
Okay.
And the tests that in the branch that Hugo mentioned are have just been updated for EOF to use ext call versions only.
Okay. So if we have differences with the test that we think we're right, this is the right time to say, this is a difference, let's hash it out. So this is the right set of tests to do this against.
I have one request. I see that there is a lot of PRs open on the Ethereum test, and should they be merged or closed or worked on? It's a little bit like I don't know what should I run or not. I use mostly the link from pull request 1339, and those are verification tests that I use for verifying EOF bytecode. But merging all of this inside the master or develop branch should clean up a lot of things.
Okay. Yeah, I think 1339 is just validation. I don't see any execution tests. And I think that's where I have most of the issues with.
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
we're going to merge this. These are the tests that don't have like regular filler tests. So these were generated from EVM1 unit tests, and I'm not sure where this will end up in the end yet. Maybe in our fork or something. But like tests repo, I don't think they will accept this. They don't have any other tests like this. And regarding other PRs, so we closed 3 PRs today because they were redundant. So currently there is this one Hugo's PR, which is going to be hopefully merged soon. And this is just the fixes to the tests that are on develop branch and tests, like the normal ones that have fillers and like the ones that mostly were written a while ago. And then we'll have just 2 PRs. This one that you linked, the validation tests, and another next to it is execution tests, also generated from EVM1, like this one. And this is another one that probably not going to be merged. So I could like combine these two into one, but not sure. They are different kinds of tests. So it also makes sense to keep them in 2 PRs. I don't know.
What's the problem? What's the issue with not merging them?
So
yeah.
I'm not sure like exactly what's the tests maintainer's position on this with, but like these tests are, so normally tests are being written as YAML and then run through Retestive, and then that generates JSON tests, and then both of the generated JSON tests and source YAML are being committed into Ethereum tests repo. And these ones we generated in a different way by taking the unit tests from EVM1 and like running our C++ utility that generates the final JSON ones. So that's kind of...
That could be a problem, but in general, they are very helpful. We can have some procedure to say, hey, wherever somebody updates, makes PR on that type of the test, at least one additional client needs to run it. So we have some validity that the tests that got merged are correct. Who is the best person to talk about that? Because it's like those tests are very valuable, and having them in Ethereum test makes sense.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's a bit unclear because like also tests have been a bit in flux because the Retestive is being deprecated in the next fork supposedly, and then there's this Python tests separately in the separate PR. I'm not sure what's the relation of Ethereum tests repo to Ethereum execution tests, which is a separate PR, but they are somehow related, but not sure if the second one takes them from the first one, and who is exactly like the one to talk to about our tests. It's a bit not clear.
Do they have a testing call? They probably don't.
I don't think there is anything like that.
Because I do remember that I think it was Marius from the Geth team. He wrote a script that took all of the retest tests and made execution spec test format for those. I don't know if that got merged or not. I know they talked about that in at Istanbul at DevConnect to try and get things working through TA then. But maybe we need instead of making these available in retest death, we need to figure out how to get these container format tests into the execution spec tests. Implement a pydatic model to read Ethereum. Change list 479, I think, is the entertaining one. They'll read the spec tests. Anyway. So I guess the short answer is we should make sure we pass 339, 349, and there's one other. But yeah. Let's workshop this on the Discord as we get things fixed. All right, any other issues that need to come up and be discussed?
I was just thinking about this address thing, and does it make sense for the opcodes to fail with an exceptional halt if there's 30 bytes instead of just accepting stuff?
That's what I
And
was
then we
leaning
can-
towards.
Yeah, and then we can like relax it in the future.
Exactly. Rather than trimming it, because that's the problem right now is balance and the others are specified. If you put garbage in the upper 12 bytes, it will strip them, and there's actually tests that validate that's what happens in legacy code. So we would just remove the stripping, and if you have anything other than zeros, we fail, or we return as if the address doesn't exist. I think rather than exceptional halting, I was going to treat it as though it's an empty account. And if we could explore that once I get the PR written, we could explore it and see what other people think of it. But my initial thought is it's an empty account and can't be updated. So you
Yeah.
can't send, you can't. So we will have to have exceptional faults, because if you do a call with value to one of those, we will need to exceptional halt. So that's an argument for exceptional halt.
Yeah. I just think there's like some kind of landmine if everything else in the stack expects addresses to be 20 bytes, but then like the balance opcode is like cool, that can be extra bytes.
So yeah, I'll start off with exceptional halt, and I'll put in the alternatives considered that we treat it as empty accounts and mention the pay operations from call as being the problem why we decided against it.
I think it has the added benefit of like you can relax it like 1 byte at a time if you want to be that fine grained, like add a byte
Yep.
for some flag and so on.
Yep. That's what I think we'll do. All right. Any other? Going once? Going twice? Go drink some coffee before your next meeting. Thanks. See you all next week.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
folks.
So,
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.